कभी कोमल बातचीत तो कभी इंटरेक्शन तेज तर्रार। तय करें मिलकर व्हाट इज रॉन्ग, व्हाट इज राइट। ITV पर अशोक व्यास के साथ इनसाइट टुनाइट। Namaskar, welcome to Insight Tonight with Ashok Vyas, and when today we are entering into this phase of stimulating interaction, I'm reminded of these two lines which were written in Hindi, goes like this: सूरज आता है हर दिन, तुम मत होना तम में गुम. Which means sun rises every day, so don't allow yourself to get lost in the darkness. The quest of newness keeps us always agile, makes our life interesting, and this quest of newness has also been like a backbone for our progress. There are people looking for a new approach to entertain us. There are people looking at new approach so that we have more comforts, so that we can connect with someone across the globe instantly. We can send a message without having to pay any money, and that company then becomes a multi-million-dollar company, or rather a company just helping people connect with each other, gets to the value of $19 billion. WhatsApp. Saying that WhatsApp, when we look at Indian politics, there are many things which are rising. And when we look back here, very near, there are many Indians who are making us proud. And some of them are bringing some exceptional, call them discoveries, which are going to be helpful not only for limited number of people in one part of the world, but they are likely to have far-reaching impact for mankind in a very significant way. And I have the pleasure of the presence of someone on phone with me who has been instrumental in introducing something, and what it is, I would have him talk about it, and he's joining me from Boston, professor of surgery at Harvard Medical School, Dr. Hemant Thatte. Welcome, Dr. Thatte, to this Insight Tonight live show at ITV today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure.
And also, let me welcome another gentleman here in the studio, and you may not see him, Dr. Saab, but he's also listening to you. And this gentleman also is inspired by the new approach that has brought a kind of dynamic movement in Indian politics. So he is a volunteer for Aam Aadmi Party. Rakesh Bisaria joins me. He has come all the way from New Jersey. And now we come to you. Once again, I want to congratulate you, and I want to thank you for joining me here today. Tell me, what kind of operations actually require organ transplant?
Generally, when you have a condition where the organs are failing, what is called the end-stage organ failure, where you cannot control the function of an organ or cannot improve the function of an organ by any medicine or drugs, under those circumstances, generally you have to undergo a transplant. For example, end-stage heart failure, where the heart cannot pump enough blood to keep the person alive, you see degenerative changes over a period of time. And before it reaches a stage of no return, generally these kind of patients become eligible for heart transplant.
So far, yeah, mostly we have heard about kidney transplant. Is heart transplant quite common?
In United States, we did about 2,500 heart transplants last year. India, basically, they don't do heart transplants. They do a lot of kidney and liver transplants, but not heart transplants, as far as I know.
I see.
But in the United States alone, there are about 117,000 patients waiting for a transplant of all kinds. So there is an extreme demand for organs in the United States, as well as all over the world. We were only able to get 2,500 hearts last year, so that's what that was done.
when you say you could only get 2,500 hearts, so that tells me that, of course, this is taken out from one body. And as a layman, when we hear about organ transplant, it appears like a very dangerous operation. And as a surgeon, what are the main challenges that you face in this process?
Well, actually, I want to make a clarification here. There were some factual errors in the Times of India article that you're referring to.
Right.
I am a professor of surgery, but I'm not a surgeon. I don't practice surgery here in the United States. I'm a scientist, basically.
I see.
So, but I can answer your question, actually. The process of transplant itself is pretty straightforward. Sewing a heart into a patient is pretty straightforward, not that difficult. The major problem is pre- and post-operative care. So maintaining the patient on a transplanted heart becomes a challenge. That is what is most challenging related to transplant process.
I see. And so as a scientist, this is just a different question. Do you feel there is distinct difference in the way scientists in India are operating or functioning in terms of the facilities and support system that they have and what you have here at Harvard?
Honestly, I have very little experience about what happens in India because it's been many years since I left the country.
I see.
And I left India as an undergrad, actually, so I haven't had a chance to work in a research field in India itself. But in terms of Harvard, absolutely, it's a world-class institute, and a lot of things that I was able to achieve or was able to do at Harvard would not have been possible anywhere else because we have a lot of state-of-the-art technology available at our hands.
And before we talk more, Doctor, there is one video that we would like to share with our viewers, and I believe it also shows the heart preserved in Somah at room temperature, and then it was restarted in Somah device, which was designed by you. So even before we take a look at this, do you want to say something about what we are about to see?
Absolutely. The video that you're going to see today actually is a heart that was preserved. Let me backtrack a little bit. The current technology allows you to preserve hearts only at 4 degrees, means at hypothermia. The fear being that if you preserve hearts at higher temperature, basically you're going to damage the heart because of warm ischemia, what is called warm ischemia. Somah was designed to be able to preserve the hearts and other organs at room temperature. So this particular heart, I actually extracted this heart, and it was preserved in Somah at room temperature for extended time. Then it was hooked up to the Somah device that we have designed in our laboratory. And it was restarted without use of any medicine or any drugs. Basically just warming up the heart made it go into normal sinus rhythm. And as you can see in the video, it is beating perfectly.
So let's share this video where we see the heart restarted in the Somah device.
This heart is beating almost for an hour now.
And
All right, Pat, go ahead and explain the parameters,
we're
functional
at
parameters.
2.7, 2.8 on our flow from the pump.
Okay.
Come on down here, Hemant. From the pump, we go through this through the heat exchanger, through the oxygenator, back up into this bag. So we're flowing into this bag, which is now pretty much the lungs or the left atrial side of the patient. It then drains by gravity this way, just through this hose, into the pulmonary veins. So 2 silicone tubes that are wide off. We're measuring left atrial pressure right at the top, and that's telling us that the monitor up above is showing our left atrial pressure anywhere between 0 and 4 or 5 millimeters of mercury. So
That's
very,
the
very
that's
low.
the blue window on the left.
The blue window on the left. Now, if you look at the right side, what the heart's doing now is it goes from the left atrium to the left, through the mitral valve, to the left ventricle, up through the aortic valve, This is now the pig's aorta, extension of his aorta. This is now an extension of the pig's body. So what we can do is by raising the height, we change the afterload that the heart has to squeeze to. So I just raised it up even higher.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still generating a really, really good pressure up there of about,
look at that.
Our peak pressure is somewhere around 110, 120 millimeters of mercury.
Yeah.
Our diastolic's down around 30.
Perfect normal rhythm, normal pressures. That's the red window.
Yep.
And the flow is what?
The flow, now what we do is we put the flow meter over here, Hemant, on the outflow right directly on the pig's aorta. This is a Doppler flow probe that's hooked up to the pump. Now the pump flow probe is independent of the actual RPMs that the pump's delivering. So it's just telling us exactly what the flow is. And we're reaching peak flows here of 4.8.
4.8 liters.
There's actual...
So you just saw a very important and a unique experiment, a novel innovation which is probably going to have far-reaching impacts, and this was Somah device designed by Dr. Thatte, who is with me from Harvard, and this was preserved at room temperature. And now back to you. This was very fascinating to see, Dr. Thatte. Now, when people donate their eyes or other limbs, they express their consent that these parts may be used for someone who needs this after their demise. Though you are a scientist, but you know how this is executed, and
right. Generally, the current procedure today is that we harvest organs from brain dead beating heart patients. So, at least in Massachusetts, though people who are organ donors, that is indicated on their driving license or a driver's license. Basically, if a patient like that comes to the emergency and he's brain dead but his heart is still beating, they are kept on ventilator till the relatives arrive. And assuming that the patient is not going to, there is irreversible damage in the brain, the doctor or the surgeons would ask for the relative's consent. Even though the driver license of that particular person says that he's an organ donor, they will still wait out of courtesy for the relatives to arrive and get permission from them to harvest the organs. Once they get the permission to harvest the organs, basically the patient is disconnected from the ventilator, and then they wait till the heart stops. And as soon as the heart stops, they go in and start harvesting the organs, starting from the heart, then the liver, then the kidneys, etc. And the last is generally the cornea and the eye that's harvested.
And typically, is there any particular period of time up to which some organs can be preserved? Will it vary from one to another organ? For example, maybe eyes or maybe kidney, they can be preserved for n number of hours, or it is standard?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I developed Somah, because the window is so short. For example, the window for heart transplant, basically our preservation heart is less than 4 hours. Generally, we don't wait for 4 hours. Once the heart is removed from a donor, it's preserved in the current solutions that are used in the clinic and transported as rapidly as possible within 2 to 3 hours to the place of the recipient. So organ storage in the current using current technology for the hearts is only 4 hours, 4 to 6 hours at the most, depending on the donor's age. Livers are generally preserved not more than 12 hours, and the kidneys not more than 24 hours, because of extensive damage caused to the organs outside the body. So one of the reasons why we developed Somah is actually to increase the temporal window where we can preserve these organs. For example, we have successfully preserved hearts for 24 hours instead of 4 hours in my lab, and we have restarted the hearts as well. We have preserved livers and kidneys for over 72 hours in the lab in fully functional state.
Wow.
The basic idea, why are we doing this? One of the reasons is that we don't have geographical limitations. For example, if a person dies in Boston, the radius of transplant would at the most be New York, right, which is about 4 hours from Boston.
Right.
With 24-hour storage, basically you can send or bring an organ from anywhere in the world in 24 hours. So that's a huge leap in terms of geographical barriers that we surpass. Another important point is basically if you increase the time of storage, then you can develop a perfect donor-recipient match. What we do currently is we just look for blood group matching, but we don't do other more intensive tissue typing matching. So this will give enough time for tissue typing so that the donor-recipient pair would be perfectly matched, and hopefully the immunosuppressant therapy can be reduced.
So this is quite fascinating and exciting development. How many years have you been working on this?
The actual development of the technology took me less than a month, but we've been working on this preclinical model for last 3 years or so.
Wonderful. And is it still in the experimental stage when it is likely to be approved and produced on mass scale?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a company in Florida, Somah that licensed this technology from Harvard.
I see.
And they are in the process of getting it into clinical trials. But right now it's in preclinical stage where we are transplanting these stored hearts in large animal models and to look for their functionality. Once those trials are completed and they are successful, then the company would be able to approach the FDA to get permission to do clinical trials. But right now it's still in preclinical stage and would take out about a year or so before it reaches the clinic for clinical trials.
Wonderful. That's so exciting to know all that you have been focusing on and have managed to accomplish. It's a great source of inspiration for other scientists as well, and definitely it's going to help many people. But tell me, what helped you in keeping your focus and persistence and maintaining this approach of looking for new solutions?
The reason was because of the limitation of the current technology. The art and science of transplant is very well established. However, the long-term outcomes have not improved, meaning that patients still tend to die within few years after transplant, and the life that they lead is very difficult. It's not a very pleasant life because of various reasons.
Right.
So one of the reasons was to develop this particular technology and try to improve the quality of the organs that are transplanted into these patients, with the hope that the long-term outcomes would improve. Say, for example, instead of 5 years, the patient would be able to live longer than 10 years because they were provided with a perfectly preserved organ. So that was one of the driving forces for developing this technology. And another major innovation that we made is that Somah allows us to actually obtain hearts from cadavers. And that's what we published in the circulation paper in 2009. We do not use organs from cadavers at the present, especially the hearts or the livers. But Somah actually lets these organs recover, the organs that have been obtained from cadavers, meaning a patient who has died for 1 hour, heart is harvested from that patient, and if preserved in Somah, it is able to recover. And we've shown its functionality, and the preclinical trials are ongoing as well. So what this will do, as I mentioned before, that there are 117,000 patients waiting for a transplant. And because of the organ demand, using cadaver as a source of organs, we would be able to meet that demand, or at least partially meet that demand.
Wonderful. I congratulate you on this discovery. And before we say thanks to you, I quickly want your thoughts on how this name Somah came about.
Well, this was because of, the whole driving force behind this is grace of my Guru Mai, basically. And because she set me on in this path of self-discovery, Somah ultimately does take you in that particular direction. And this being a source of rejuvenation, and we were rejuvenating the organs during storage, I thought what better name than to name it Somah. And another reason for that was that we have Greek and Latin in English language in the scientific field. It is time to bring Sanskrit into the scientific field as well. And that's why I named it Somah.
So where we are concluding, you give me enough scope for our next conversation, where we'll be talking about how science and spiritual understanding or appreciation overlap, and can help each other.
Absolutely. We'd love to do that.
Wonderful. So I appreciate your presence with us, sir. And once again, Dr. Hemant Thatte, Professor of Surgery, Harvard Medical School, instrumental in offering a new discovery whereby organs can be preserved for extended period of time. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
And now we'll be moving towards another newness, a new approach in Indian politics. And before we do that, time for a short break.